My daughter cried all night after Karen screamed in her face over chalk drawings on the sidewalk. I thought it would end there. It didn't. It ended with a gun in a courtroom. I can still hear her sobbing into her pillow, small hands clutching her unicorn plush like it could keep the world from falling apart. She was 8. Too young to understand why a grown woman with a clipboard and an attitude would care about pastel butterflies drawn in Crayola chalk. Too young to know that some people use power like a weapon, even when it's borrowed from an HOA rulebook. We had only lived in the neighborhood a few months. I had chosen it for the good schools, the quiet streets, the idea that maybe I could raise my daughter somewhere that felt like peace. I thought the biggest challenge would be soccer tryouts or bake sale fundraisers. I didn't expect to be called into court over something so small, so stupid, and so unbelievably out of proportion. And I didn't expect to sit in that courtroom and watch Karen's hand dip into her oversized leather purse while her voice cracked under pressure, that thin veneer of suburban civility shattering in a heartbeat. There's a moment, when you're trained the way I am, when the world slows down and every muscle in your body knows what comes next before your mind even processes it. I remember standing not fast, just deliberately and moving toward my daughter, blocking her from the line of sight. Karen's hand was shaking. The bailiff was yelling. I didn't even hear the words. I just saw my child's face, pale and wide-eyed, and knew that this woman had crossed the line no one gets to cross. And that was the moment I stopped hiding who I really was. We moved into that neighborhood in late spring, just after school let out. I remember the air smelling like cut grass and grilled hot dogs, like the kind of ordinary life I had always wanted to give my daughter. Her name is Lily. She's got this way of humming when she draws, like the pencil or crayon is singing with her, and I remember thinking that maybe, finally, we'd found a place where she could be a kid without always looking over her shoulder. The house was modest, but clean and bright, with a little front yard just big enough for her to play in. She took to the sidewalk like it was a canvas, pulling out her chalk every morning and sketching flowers and suns, stars, hearts, little animals that looked more like potatoes than pets. I let her. She wasn't hurting anyone. The rain would come, wash it away, and she'd start again the next day, just as cheerful. The neighbors seemed friendly at first. Polite waves, short conversations about trash day and school bus schedules. I kept my background quiet, told people I worked in the city, that I traveled sometimes. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. I never wear my badge unless I have to. After years of dealing with people at their worst, you learn the value of being underestimated. I first noticed the sign for the Homeowners Association near the community park. It looked like an afterthought, small and worn, nailed crooked to a fence post. There was a number underneath, and a note about quarterly meetings. Nothing about that struck me as a threat. It felt like one of those mild inconveniences that comes with suburban life, like leaf blower noise or mysteriously disappearing Amazon packages. Lily made a friend down the block, a little girl named Taylor, and they'd bounce between houses after school. Sidewalk chalk turned into hopscotch, hopscotch turned into water balloons, and before long there were afternoons filled with laughter and wet footprints across our porch. I remember sitting on the front steps one evening, coffee in hand, listening to them play and thinking, maybe we'd made it. Maybe this could really be home. I didn't know that someone was already watching, already planning to make us regret moving in. The first time I met Karen, I didn't know her name. She didn't offer it, and I didn't ask. She showed up at my front porch while I was unloading groceries from the car, sunglasses perched too high on her nose, a thick folder tucked under her arm. Lily was around the side of the house with Taylor, giggling about something I couldn't hear. Karen's eyes darted toward the sound like it offended her. "You live here?" she asked, her tone already clipped. I nodded, careful not to bristle. She glanced at my driveway, then at the chalk still faintly visible on the sidewalk. We try to maintain a certain standard in this neighborhood. Children's artwork belongs on paper, not public concrete. I remember blinking, trying to process what she had just said. She reached into the folder and pulled out a stapled packet. "Rules," she said. "Guidelines. Standards for lawn care, vehicle placement, noise, decorations, trash bins, and yes, sidewalk use." Her voice was the kind that made you feel scolded no matter how politely she phrased the words. I took the packet and thanked her. She didn't leave right away. She lingered, eyes flicking to the sound of the girls laughing again. then back to me. Some of us work hard to keep this community orderly. I didn't reply. There are moments when silence speaks louder than any argument. She left with a tight smile and a promise that we'd be seeing each other again soon. I didn't doubt it. The next day, Lily came inside and asked what violating property appearance code meant. I asked where she heard that, and she told me Karen had walked past while they were drawing and said, "You're not supposed to do that here. It's against code." My daughter, 8 years old and covered in chalk dust, had looked up at this stranger and tried to explain that the drawings weren't permanent. Karen told her it didn't matter. I didn't call the police. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I calmly walked down the block that evening and knocked on Karen's door. She opened it half an inch, chain still locked, and gave me a smile I didn't return. I told her to please speak to me directly if she had an issue. She responded with a comment about parents setting poor examples and closed the door in my face. The next morning, a notice was taped to our mailbox. Violation of HOA appearance code. Second warning. There had been no first. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I could see exactly where this was going. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was using them as weapons. There was something in her eyes, something brittle and hungry. It wasn't about chalk, it wasn't even about the HOA. It was about power. She needed someone to dominate. She decided it was going to be me. She had no idea how wrong she was. The letters started coming every week after that. They weren't handwritten or personal, just printed forms with clipped language and vague accusations. Lawn not edged properly. Trash bins visible past 7. 0 p.m. Vehicle tire slightly over sidewalk line. No photos, no warnings. Just citations and fines and the subtle pressure that builds like steam in a sealed room. At first, I filed them away and ignored them. It felt petty, beneath response. But Karen didn't stop. She escalated. One afternoon I came home from a 3-day trip, a routine case involving fraud across state lines. I found a notice taped to my front door, accusing me of abandoning my property. A second document was folded behind it, this one threatening lien placement for unpaid fines. I had been gone less than 72 hours. The grass was cut, the mail held, and Lily had stayed with her aunt. Nothing was out of place. But to Karen, order wasn't the point. She wanted obedience. She wanted to be feared. I saw her watching from behind her curtain as I peeled the paper off my door. Her outline was stiff, the edge of her face barely visible behind the floral pattern. That same evening, Lily told me she wasn't allowed to play with Taylor anymore. Taylor's mother had said it was best not to get involved. I didn't press, though I noticed the look in her eyes when she said it. Regret mixed with something close to fear. Karen had begun knocking on neighbors' doors. I overheard 2 women at the corner whispering about a petition to have me removed. One of them noticed me passing and gave a half smile, like she had been caught doing something shameful. The other woman looked away. I understood. Karen's reach was thin, but precise. Her voice had the sharpness of someone who knew just enough rules to sound legitimate and just enough venom to keep people from pushing back. Then came the dog incident. We don't own one, but someone reported a menacing animal on our property. Animal control showed up while Lily was doing her homework inside. I opened the door to find a uniformed officer asking about a black pit bull, allegedly chained near our porch. There was no dog. There never had been. When I asked who had made the call, he said the complaint was anonymous, but I didn't need confirmation. I started documenting everything. I installed a camera under the eave, one that blended in with the trim. I saved every letter, every notice, every envelope with her name at the bottom. I started a timeline, noting when she walked past our home, when the citations arrived, when Lily came in crying because she felt like the fun had been drained from her summer. The worst part wasn't the harassment. It was the way it began to change my daughter. She stopped drawing. Her chalk sat in its little box by the door untouched. She asked if we could move again. I told her no, not this time. This wasn't just some busybody neighbor. This was a pattern. I'd seen it before in entirely different environments, in entirely different uniforms. The language was the same. The methods were the same. Push the boundary, punish resistance, control the weak, isolate, intimidate, silence. I had dealt with people like Karen overseas, in boardrooms, behind closed doors with surveillance mics humming under the table. The scenery was different, but the behavior never changed. That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop on its own. Karen wasn't going to get bored or back down. She was going to keep tightening her grip until something broke. And I refused to let it be my daughter. It was a Tuesday when Karen finally crossed the line I had prayed she never would. Lily had just come home from school and was sitting on the front steps with a juice box in one hand and a book in the other. She liked the front stoop, said it made her feel like she was part of the neighborhood, even if most of the kids didn't wave anymore. I was inside, finishing up a report on my laptop, keeping an ear out through the open window. I heard her voice before I saw her. Karen. Sharp. Rising. The kind of tone that doesn't ask questions, just throws accusations. I stood up and moved to the front door, but by the time I opened it, she was already standing at the edge of my walkway, pointing down at Lily. Her finger jabbed toward the porch step, where a few chalk lines remained from a half-hearted attempt Lily had made over the weekend. It hadn't even been a drawing, just a swirl of blue and pink. "Do you think you're special?" Karen was saying. "The rules apply to everyone. That includes you, little girl." Lily looked up at her, frozen, the straw from her juice box still between her lips. She wasn't crying yet. She wasn't even blinking. Just sitting there, trying to understand why a grown woman she barely knew was towering over her like she had done something shameful. I stepped outside and said her name with enough force to make her head snap around. Karen straightened, then smoothed her blouse like she hadn't just been scolding a child. I asked her what exactly she thought she was doing. She said something about educating the younger residents. I asked her again. Her eyes narrowed. She said she was doing her duty to the community. Lily had gone quiet. She was looking at me, waiting to see if I would do something or say something that made the world right again. I told Karen that if she ever spoke to my daughter again without me present, we were going to have a very different conversation. She laughed like she couldn't take that seriously, and then walked away without another word. But she didn't walk fast. She lingered, as if daring me to follow. That night, Lily asked me why Miss Karen didn't like her. I told her it wasn't about her at all. I told her some people just need to make others feel small to feel big. She nodded like she understood, but she curled up tighter than usual when I tucked her in. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board. I knew it wouldn't go anywhere, but it was the first step. Paper leaves trails, and I wanted every piece of this documented. Karen had shown her hand, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she made a mistake she couldn't talk her way out of. It happened a week later. Lily had been invited to a birthday party at a house across the neighborhood, one of the few parents who hadn't bought into Karen's campaign of intimidation. I walked her over, made sure she was safe, then returned home to finish some paperwork. It was a quiet afternoon, at least on the surface. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find two uniformed officers standing there, not tense but wary. One of them asked if I had a moment. The other had a clipboard and a folded notice. I invited them in. They declined. They said there had been a report of threatening behavior, that someone had seen me brandishing a weapon on my porch 2 nights ago, that I had allegedly intimidated a resident with it. I didn't laugh, though I wanted to. I asked if the report came with a name. The officer with the clipboard said it was anonymous. I told them they could check my security footage if they wanted. It covered the whole porch and most of the front yard. They hesitated, then agreed. I pulled it up on the TV and let them watch. Nothing but me watering the hedges that evening. Coffee mug in one hand, hose in the other. They stood in silence as the footage played. I offered to send them the file. One of them nodded. They left without another word, except for a half-hearted apology about having to follow up on reports. It wasn't about the complaint. It was about the paper trail. Karen was laying bricks for something, building a case or an illusion of one. She had moved past citations and petty warnings. She was trying to provoke me, to make me slip. 2 days later, a formal summons arrived. Civil court. The HOA, represented by Karen, was seeking damages for emotional distress, property defacement, and community disruption. I knew it was nonsense, but I also knew this was what she wanted. To drag me into a public space, to try to humiliate me, to break my image in front of my daughter, in front of anyone who still hadn't chosen a side. I considered letting it pass. Then I remembered the way Lily looked at me when Karen yelled at her. I remembered her asking why being nice didn't make people nice back, and I knew I wasn't going to let this end in silence. I called a lawyer I trusted, not from the neighborhood, but someone who owed me a favor. We prepped a statement. I brought every letter, every complaint, every video clip. It wasn't about proving a point, it was about drawing a line. If Karen wanted a stage, I'd meet her on it, but I wouldn't come as the quiet neighbor she thought I was. I'd come as the person she never saw coming. Court was set for the following Friday, and none of us had any idea how far she was willing to go. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, soft carpeting, uncomfortable chairs arranged in uneven rows. There were only a handful of people in attendance. A few neighbors I recognized sitting near the back, some curious, some pretending not to be. The judge was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a calm presence. She didn't look like she tolerated nonsense. That gave me some comfort. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table with a tight smile stretched across her face. Her blazer was too crisp, her hair too sculpted, every detail carefully arranged to communicate righteousness. She held a folder in her lap and tapped it like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. She didn't acknowledge me when I entered. She didn't have to. I could feel the heat of her stare as I helped Lily settle into the seat beside my attorney. Lily was quiet, her feet not quite reaching the floor, her small hands folded in her lap. She had wanted to come. She said she needed to hear what people were saying about us with her own ears. I told her she didn't have to. She said she was tired of hiding. The judge called the session to order. Karen stood and began her testimony with trembling indignation. She painted herself as a protector of peace, a guardian of neighborhood standards, a woman harassed by a hostile neighbor with a frightening presence and a dangerous attitude. She gestured toward me without looking directly. She used the word intimidation more than once. She said Lily's drawings had been confrontational. She said the colors were aggressive. At one point, she said she feared for her life because of the way I stood on my porch. My attorney didn't object. He didn't need to. He let her go on until she ran out of steam, which happened just as the judge asked if she had any proof. Karen hesitated, then opened the folder. She pulled out a series of printed photographs, most of them grainy, some clearly taken from behind curtains. They showed our lawn, our trash bins, one of me bending over to pick up Lily's backpack. None of them proved anything. Then she reached into her oversized purse, and everything stopped. Her hand disappeared beneath the leather flap. It wasn't rushed, but it wasn't careful either. The room shifted, tension thickening in the air. My eyes locked onto her hand. Lily leaned closer to me, whispering my name. I placed a hand on her shoulder and stood slowly. Karen's hand emerged, holding a small black object. There were gasps. One of the neighbors stood up. My attorney stepped back from the table. The judge's voice rose, demanding to know what Karen was doing, but she didn't answer. She held it up like it proved something. A compact, semi-automatic pistol with a silver barrel and worn grip. My body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped in front of Lily and raised my voice, firm but steady, identifying myself. The room froze. Karen blinked, like she had just realized where she was. One of the court officers lunged toward her, shouting for her to drop it. The weapon hit the floor with a soft metallic thud. Lily screamed. The sound cut through everything, louder than the shouts, louder than the scramble of feet, louder than the judge banging her gavel in rapid bursts. Officers wrestled Karen to the ground. She didn't resist, not exactly. She just kept yelling about how she was defending herself, how she was tired of being bullied. They handcuffed her and pulled her to her feet. Her face was flushed, her lipstick smeared. She looked like someone who had been exposed, stripped of every performance, every polished lie. Lily was crying, clinging to my leg. I picked her up and whispered that she was safe now, that it was over. But I knew it wasn't, not yet. Not until the truth of who I was stood in the open where no one could twist it again. The courtroom was still buzzing when I stepped forward and handed the judge my credentials. Her eyes scanned the badge, then looked back up at me with something between shock and understanding. Karen had come to court thinking she was the one in control, but now the room knew the truth. She hadn't threatened just a neighbor. She had pulled a gun in front of a federal agent's daughter. The room was quiet in the way a place becomes after something shatters. People moved slowly, like their limbs had to catch up with the weight of what they had just seen. Karen was led out of the courtroom, wrists locked in cuffs, eyes wide and unfocused. She didn't speak again after they read her Miranda rights. Her lawyer, if she had one, hadn't even stood. He sat at her table, staring at the floor like he wanted to be anywhere else. Lily was holding my hand, her grip tighter than it had ever been. She was still trembling, but there were no more tears. Just silence, and that look of disbelief children get when they've seen something their mind can't quite explain. I crouched down beside her and told her she was brave. I told her she had done everything right. She nodded but didn't let go. The judge cleared her throat and asked me to approach. I did, quietly, credentials in hand. She studied the badge again and asked why I hadn't disclosed my position earlier. I told her I didn't want this case influenced by anything but the truth. I said I hadn't come to court as a federal agent. I had come as a father. A man protecting his daughter from someone who believed rules gave her the right to abuse people. She nodded slowly and turned her attention to the court clerk. The record would reflect the incident in full. She dismissed the original civil complaint with prejudice. There would be a criminal case now, separate and much more serious. I watched as the other neighbors filtered out, their eyes avoiding mine, their faces pale with discomfort. Some looked ashamed. A few looked relieved. One or two even nodded quietly as they left, as if to say, "We were wrong, we're sorry," but none of them said it out loud. Outside, Lily looked up at me and asked if Karen was going to jail. I told her probably, but it wasn't our job to decide. She asked if we could go home. I said yes, and we walked to the car hand in hand, the sun already starting to dip low behind the buildings. In that moment, I realized something had changed. Karen's power had always come from fear, from the silence she created around her, but now the silence was broken. Everyone had seen who she really was. Everyone had heard the scream, seen the gun, watched her fall apart. There was no more hiding behind printed letters and neighborhood codes. She had pushed too far, and the mask had slipped. I hadn't come to court to prove who I was, but in the end, she had made me show it. And when she did, everything she had built around her finally collapsed. The news spread quickly. By the next morning, every house on our street had heard what happened in court. Some pretended they hadn't. They walked their dogs past our driveway without looking up, heads down, phones in hand. Others came to the door with awkward expressions and offered short apologies, saying things like, "I didn't know it had gotten that bad," or "I thought she was just strict." I accepted their words without much emotion, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I had learned how empty regret can sound after the damage is already done. Karen was charged with multiple counts, including brandishing a weapon in a government building and endangering a minor. She was denied bail after the judge reviewed her behavior leading up to the incident. The footage from my security camera helped, as did the sworn testimony from others who had been silent until now. One neighbor submitted a statement describing how Karen had bullied their son for leaving his basketball out overnight. Another finally admitted she had signed one of Karen's HOA complaints under pressure, fearing what would happen if she refused. The HOA board met privately the following week. A new president was appointed. Karen was removed permanently from any decision-making roles. I received a written apology from the board, signed by every member except her. The fines were voided. The liens cancelled. No one brought up the chalk drawings again. Lily slowly returned to herself. She started drawing again on the weekends, more careful now, but with the same joy in her hands. I sat with her sometimes, letting the colors smear on my fingertips as I helped her trace the outline of stars and flowers. One Saturday, a few other kids joined in. No one said a word about the sidewalk. It just felt like childhood again. I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't need Karen to suffer. What I wanted was peace. What I wanted was to know my daughter could play outside without being treated like a threat. And now, for the first time in months, it felt like that was possible. Not because Karen was gone, but because her power had finally been taken away. Sometimes people ask why I never led with the badge, why I didn't flash my title or raise my voice when Karen started her games. The truth is, I wanted to live like everyone else. I wanted Lily to grow up in a world where respect didn't have to be forced. But when the moment came, I did what needed to be done, not as an agent, but as a father. Because in the end, titles don't protect people, actions do. And when someone threatens your peace, you don't wait for justice. You become it, calmly and without apology.